clearly we're seeing a lot of that excitement play out in Starbucks. If you take a look at Chipotle shares, they're under a tremendous amount of pressure this morning. Is that a bit of a surprise given the fact that Jack Hartung, it sounds like the company is saying that he's now going to be staying on indefinitely, and maybe the shape or direction here of Chipotle might not change maybe to the degree that Wall Street seems to be nervous about here this morning?
Yeah, I would agree with your assessment. I think it might have been a little bit of a surprise given the sudden change in Jack's role at Chipotle. But at the same time, I think the brand has evolved itself from being just a CEO-driven, CEO-led. And I think over time, it has proven itself that it's larger than its own management. Now they have really propelled this virtual cycle with the younger consumer base, having tapped into, new set of the population that previously was probably not being considered for Chipotle. Think about the importance of the Chipotle lanes that is tapping into the, more convenient-oriented consumer. Well, those type of consumers are now much more familiar with the brand. And we are seeing that Chipotle is now working also in the small town, in university cities, areas where previously one would have never thought that Chipotle might be working. And so right now we're talking about a potentially a cookie cutter approach that Chipotle will need to be deploying into more areas and expand the number of units, which again, while we like, Brian's leadership at Chipotle, I think the brand has evolved beyond his management.
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, Danilo, and it points to even further confusion about the degree of the pressure that we're seeing on Chipotle stock this morning. Nick, I want to give you the final word on this. Given the pressure that we are seeing the stock under, what does Chipotle have to do moving forward? Do you think it's just a continuation of the same and they'll have their say at the next earnings print?
Yeah, look, I think Chipotle's in a very good place, and I think they're in very good hands. Both Jack and both gentlemen here that are taking over. I credit both of them with the turnaround as much as I credit Brian Niccol with. So I think they're in very good hands. I think they're on autopilot, frankly, and not much has to change.
Danilo, I actually want to get one more quickly on you. I'm curious to what extent Starboard impacted the executive shakeup that we're seeing today. What's your take on that?
Hard to say. I would say clearly the investors were disappointed with management, both current shareholders as well as wannabe investors into Starbucks, and I think they've aired their frustrations over a long period of time. I think activists might have taken a decisive role into establishing the path forward for Starbucks. I don't know if that means that Starboard was, necessarily the kind of the investor poaching, quote unquote, Brian Niccol out of Chipotle. I think it was probably indicative of the wider investment base being a little bit frustrated with current management at Starbucks.
Danilo, was it more so the second quarter earnings, the disappointment there, the fact that they hadn't really proved that turnaround story? Could that also have, I guess, how much of that do you think contributed to this change and the timing of it?
Yeah, I think the conversation with investors that we've had indicated that investors were looking for upward trajectory into the quarter, meaning they were probably expecting to see some softness in Starbucks, but at the same time, they were hoping to see some exit rate being higher, indicative of the fact that the actions that management was taking were the appropriate ones, were the ones that would be able to make Starbucks get out of this situation of losing their customer base, as well as being unable to tap into the new consumer base, as Nick was saying before. So I think the frustration was less about the amount of decline and much more about the lack of positive catalyst from here on and positive trajectory into the performance.